It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of April 2nd, 1993. Four movies to look at today, so let's go ahead and jump on into it. And we're going to start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, but once you hear the title of it, it's big for several reasons, but not the reasons you might think. It's Burt Reynolds in the family buddy cop comedy Cop and a Half. So yeah, this is not a movie that's really all that memorable for the reasons that you would think it would be. It's memorable for being probably one of the worst comedies ever made, one of the worst movies of the year. The fact that it's directed by Henry Winkler of all people, but I mean, there was some promise to it. I mean, honestly, I'm looking at some of the information on the production history of this. They actually wanted Macaulay Culkin to be the leading kid in the movie, and he was going to star alongside Kurt Russell, which probably could have been interesting, but Culkin dropped out, then Kurt Russell dropped out, and so you got Burt Reynolds and Norman D. Golden, who had a phenomenal career, wink wink, but yeah, I'm looking at his Wikipedia page right now. There's nothing of interest. There's nothing after this except for a TV movie. But he's apparently a rapper now who goes by the name of Enormous, which is not what his career ended up being. But yeah, suffice it to say, this is not a very good movie, and it shocks me that this was a success. In fact, it shocked a lot of people that it was a success because apparently when it came out, the movie wasn't even supposed to make as much as it did. It made like $6 million on its opening weekend, which for 1993 standards, that's a pretty big deal because most of these movies didn't have these big 20 million, 30 million, even $100 million opening weekends back then. Like anything that had like a 20 or 30 million dollar opening weekend was like a big summer blockbuster, and this was just like this was just there because it was the most popular, I guess, the big thing at the time. Apparently, Variety thought that the movie did successfully because the poster was reminiscent of Kindergarten Cop. Well, if that's the case, then so many other movies with similar posters compared to bigger successes should have been more successful. It's just, I don't know. I think this was just a success because there was nothing else out there for kids, and this was out there, so they just said, screw it. We're going to go see, the parents just said, screw it, we're going to go see this movie. But, yeah, Burt Reynolds, this is not doing him any favors. This is a movie that's just, it's just a mess on so many levels. I mean, I can't imagine any single person on this planet actually liking this movie. Oh yeah, that's right. Roger Ebert liked this movie. Well, okay. To be fair to Roger Ebert, even he said it's not a classic by any means. But I'm sorry, I'd rather watch Home Alone 2 again than watch Cop and a Half again. I mean, of course, this is one of Roger Ebert's most notorious positive reviews for something that's clearly terrible, which is interesting because in the same year, Gene Siskel did the same thing with Carnosaur, a movie he really liked and Roger Ebert really hated. And it was one of those running gags that they had over the last couple of years of their time on Siskel and Ebert, and it made for a lot of good funny moments. But which is honestly, if the funniest moments from this movie came from the Siskel and Ebert reviews, then you know this movie is not very good. Is just a mess on so many levels. It's like this movie makes Stop on My Mom Will Shoot look like Citizen Kane by comparison. It's that kind of a movie. It's just like it's a mess on so many levels, and it's a huge downfall for Burt Reynolds. I mean, his career took a little bounce back after Evening Shade, which was on at the time, but yeah, this took him back down a huge peg. So, and that's pretty much all I got to say about this movie. This movie's pretty bad on so many levels, and it tells you something when Henry Winkler himself hasn't directed any movie since then. This movie literally killed his directing career, so that should probably tell you something right from the get-go. So that's Cop and a Half. So let's go ahead and move on to a much better family film that came out this weekend, Disney's The Adventures of Huck Finn. So in a way, this is kind of an interesting movie in particular because Disney had this, and then they did Tom and Huck just 2 years later, which was more focused on the comedic aspects of them. Because in this movie, Tom Sawyer doesn't even show up in here. This is basically Huck Finn's story, where he's traveling with Jim, played by Courtney B. Vance. Huck Finn's played by Elijah Wood, and honestly, this is kind of an underrated movie. This is actually kind of an enjoyable film. Like, I like the performances by Woods and fans. You have Jason Robards also in here, and Robbie Coltrane. A good cast overall. Ron Perlman, Dana Ivey, Mary Louise Wilson, Anne Hesh, James Gammon. Who else is in here? I can't. I haven't seen this movie in a while, so I can't really remember it. I remember this, but I do remember liking it. Renee O'Connor from Xena Warrior Princess, Laura Bell Bundy, who went on to become a big country music star, Danny Tamborelli from The Adventures of Pete and Pete, Curtis Armstrong, Francis Conroy from 6 Feet Under. They got a really good cast in here, and this is directed by Stephen Sommers, who also became better known for his work with The Mummy, and he'd actually do another Disney live-action film with them, The Jungle Book, which comes out the year after this. Not the Jon Favreau Jungle Book, the one that came out recently. I'm talking about the one from '94. We'll get to that one eventually, because that one has some interesting aspects to talk about. But yeah, this is a pretty solid movie overall. It's one that I don't think a lot of people really talk about, because it kind of came and went, but it did have this kind of following that it eventually got a DVD release and eventually was seen on Disney+. It's overall a pretty solid film. Not a great film per se, but it's a movie that I think works pretty well for what it is. It could have been a whole lot more, but for what it is, it's perfectly fine, and it actually is a pretty fun adventure movie. I really recommend it if you can find it. Tom and Huck, on the other hand, we'll save that one when we get to 1995, because that one is not quite as good, but I don't even want to use the word good for it. But like I said, we'll get to that one eventually. But so that's The Adventures of Huck Finn. Now let's move on to the next movie, and that is Alicia Silverstone in her first film role, along with Carrie Elways in The Crush. So like I said, this was Alicia Silverstone's first major film role. She had been in a couple of music videos for Aerosmith, most notably Crazy, which also featured Steven Tyler's daughter, Liv Tyler. But this was before she eventually became successful with Clueless a couple years after this. But she's in this movie along with Carrie Elways, also Kurtwood Smith's in here, Amber Benson from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And believe it or not, this is actually based on the filmmaker who made this, Alan Shapiro, based this movie on events of his life. The girl on who he based Adrian actually sued him for using her real name, Darian, for Alicia Silverstone's character. And as a result, when the movie was aired for television, they changed the name of the character from Darian to Adrian. Although you hear it in the trailer, it's still credited as Darian Forster, I should say. But it's still also on the VHS and Laserdisc. I'm not sure if it's on the Blu-ray for this, because I've never seen the Blu-ray version of this. I do remember seeing this movie on TV, and I mean, we've seen this movie done over and over again. It's kind of like Poison Ivy, mixed in with a little bit of Fatal Attraction, except cut down, except like 20 years taken off of age, 10, 15, 20 years. But I mean, the movie did become a cult classic in some circles, and it actually did kind of influence other thrillers and suspense movies of the decade. Sort of. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think a lot of movies really took from this, but maybe I'm completely wrong on that. Maybe there is something about this, but I've seen it, and it's actually kind of decent. Like, it's not a great movie, but I was expecting a whole lot worse, and Silverstone does show her acting abilities in this that would eventually lead to her success in Clueless. It's a decent film. It's not one I'd watch over and over again, but it is one that I was just kind of like, okay, I'm glad I kind of saw it, but it's not something I want to watch over and over again. It doesn't really have a lot of memorability to it, but there's a lot more funny moments in there than thrilling moments. That should tell you a whole lot there, but yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about The Crush. Let's go ahead and move on to the last movie that we have here, and that is Danny DeVito in Jack the Bear. So, I don't know the history behind this movie because I can't find it on here, but if you saw the end of the trailer and you see the year for that trailer's date, it said 1991. So, I guess this was a movie that was held back for several years by 20th Century Fox because they didn't think that this was actually going to work out, but, I mean, I could kind of see why, because I've seen the movie itself, and, I don't know, it's not horrible, but it's not a movie that I think Danny DeVito really thought it was going to be, because it just looks like an Oscar bait type movie. It just looks like a movie that he was trying to get an Oscar for Best Actor for, and it definitely shows on screen there, but, there are a lot of notable things about this movie. Marshall Herskovitz, the director of this, is best known for creating the shows 30-something, My So-Called Life, Once and Again, And and he worked on Nashville. Steven Sicilian is a writer you should be very familiar with, even if you've never seen him. Even if you've never seen, don't know who he is, you've definitely seen his work before. He's the man who's written for films like Awakenings, Gangs of New York, Moneyball. Recently, The Irishman, created the night of, a great HBO miniseries that was on TV about 5 years ago. And as far as this movie goes, it's just kind of mediocre. It's a movie that I think has more. It's trying a little too hard to really throw on the emotional moments. It's trying a little too hard story wise. There's really nothing all that interesting or exciting about it, particular. But I mean, Danny DeVito's trying his best here. It's not like he's half-assing it. He's given a decent performance here, but I just don't think there was really a lot there that could make this really work as well as I think they wanted it to. You also have Gary Sinise in here. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is in this. So is Reese Witherspoon, another one of her early roles. It's a largely forgettable movie. It's a movie that I saw and it was just kind of like, I mean, it's there. That's probably the best way to describe it. It's there. It's nothing really all that exciting. It's nothing really all that engaging. It's a movie that's just kind of there. It's not one that's exciting. It's not that one that's intriguing. It's not one of the worst, but it's not one of the best either. It's a movie that just pretty much exists for what it is. So there you go. That's Jack the Bear. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. We got some movies of interest to talk about next time around. Indecent Proposal with Woody Harrelson, Demi Moore, and Robert Redford. The baseball classic, The Sandlot. Chuck Norris in Sidekicks. Body Rest in Motion, This Boy's Life, and American Friends. So 6 movies to look at next time around, and we will do just that. With that said, though, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you for watching, I'll see you next time, and until then, as always, take care.